Okay, I think we've got audio. I think we have video. I think we're kind of set. Excellent. So I apologize. The room's a little different than I expected. I thought I'd be talking to this third, and instead there's people over here. So I'm not ignoring you, but I got to see the computer. If you might feel more engaged if you move this way. I apologize to say that, but that's kind of the dynamics of this room. So we're talking about add-ons, editors, picks. I'm Richard Esplin. I work with Jeff doing community technology, developer outreach, technical marketing for Alfresco. And for the last year, I've been working on the Alfresco Add-Ons website. Anybody here familiar with the Add-Ons website? Has anybody been there? So a couple of hands. A few hands. That's good. That's good. But there's enough hands not going up that I'll give you a little bit of explanation. So about a year ago, we used to host a place where people could run their own open source projects. But nowadays there's companies like GitHub and Bitbucket, Google Code that do this very well. And so we said, really, it doesn't make sense for us to say, please host your stuff on our infrastructure. Instead, host it wherever you want and put it in our directory. So all add-ons is a directory of things that help Alfresco. So it's at addons.alfresco.com. And I built the site with my team, and I help keep it up to date. But I'm not necessarily an editor, but it sounded good to call it editors picks. But so the point of this talk is there are add-ons that the community said that were good, and there's add-ons that I thought I hear a lot about and I play with a little bit that I thought were really cool. And I'm hoping to give you guys a leg up as you play with add-ons. So a little bit of process for how I selected the add-ons to discuss today. So on the add-ons website, there's a highest rated feed. And you can vote for add-ons you like. And so I started with that feed. Now, not as many add-ons have received votes as I expected. So the top add-on in the system only has about 20 votes, which is a lot for that system. But it's not as many as I expected. That also means that there's some exciting add-ons that haven't received much exposure yet. So I went through and made a list of some of those. I also wanted add-ons that I think are personally interesting. They're much more developer-oriented than certain people would think, but than maybe somebody else would pick. But for this crowd, I thought developer-oriented tools would make a lot of sense. So they need to solve a development and admin problem. Wanted more exposure. And I also wanted to make sure I didn't discuss add-ons that are on the engineering roadmap or that are being discussed other places at DevCon or in the community right now. So this talk is a broad view, not a deep view. My goal is to cover a whole bunch of add-ons, and you'll probably find 2 or 3 in this conversation that you think are worth looking at in more detail. That's the way it's supposed to go. So I'm not going, my goal is not to be the expert on these add-ons or to go into tons of detail on all the fine points, just to give you exposure to a whole bunch of stuff. So save you some research time, look at a few tools in depth, and make Alfresco more productive and enjoyable. So other places you can find out about add-ons. So these are add-ons I just want you to be aware of, but I'm not going to discuss. You can go to these locations. So here at DevCon, we've had a number of add-ons discussed. It's funny, I made my list and I actually prepared my presentation, and then I saw the other speakers and thought, oh, well, I got to get rid of all my add-ons because other people took them. Some really top ones there. We have a Dashlet challenge every year. And last year, the FME guys won with one of their Dashlets. We'll talk about that in a minute. This year, I forgot who won, but there were 6 really good Dashlets. But on the wiki page, it lists who won for the Dashlets. And Will Abson discussed some of these Dashlets in his presentation. Florian discussed the JavaScript console. The JavaScript console is a great development tool, and you should all know about it. And if you didn't attend his presentation, you should check it out. So these will be recorded. Unfortunately, not all the recordings worked out. We're working on some of the recordings. But a lot of these presentations will be in San Jose, and we're going to get another chance to record. So hopefully, you can catch recordings for the presentations that happen, since I'm in the last slot. But unfortunately, the JavaScript console presentation, he didn't come he's not going to redo it in San Jose. So hopefully that recording worked out. The site extensions project. So Eric is one of the developers for Alfresco, and he did a side project for an add-on that you plug into Alfresco, into Share, and it helps you generate a site project. So when you're in Share and you say, I want to, what kind of site do you want to create? It helps you create a site for that, to extend the site framework with your own project. And it auto-generates a whole bunch of pieces of that. It's a pretty slick project. It's, I got him to list it in add-ons today, so it's really fresh. And he discussed this some in his presentation yesterday. And Nathan, of course, is here. He maintains the PDF toolkit, and he gave a presentation on that. The PDF toolkit has some great functionality for annotating PDFs and watermarking PDFs and transforming PDFs and doing all this PDF stuff. And so if you have a need that's PDF related, the PDF toolkit will probably address that need. And if it doesn't, then let Nathan know so he can implement it in his evenings and weekends.
Nice.
There you go. And CMS views. So part of the team I work on spends a lot of time, we do Drupal plus Alfresco for a lot of our infrastructure. And so CMS views is how we connect Drupal to Alfresco. So anytime you need to get information from Alfresco onto the web and you're using Drupal because you've decided that's what you want to do, there's similar solutions for Liferay and a lot of other frameworks. CMS views is the way to go in the Drupal world. And Ian Norton, who gave a presentation on this earlier, and it goes into detail on how you can connect Drupal to Alfresco. Sorry, I hit the wrong direction. So I mentioned the Dashlet Challenge winners. In the wiki, there's a Dashlet Challenge page, and that lists all these Dashlet Challenge winners, all the submissions and who won. There's some great projects there, really good add-ons, and some of them have been inspiration for a lot of the things we've done on our roadmap, and others of them are still great projects for you to use to meet your own needs. So that's a great place to find out about a number of add-ons, all Dashlet related in Share. Most of them are user focused, so it gives you an idea for what those are. Now, of course, Drupal and CMS.lib is not the only way to get Alfresco objects onto the web. Most Alfresco add-ons are written using the CMIS framework, CMIS API. And the chemistry project is the umbrella project. It's vendor independent. It's not Alfresco, but a lot of Alfrescans participate there. And at Apache Chemistry, you can get libraries for interacting with CMIS through Java, C#, .NET, PHP, Python, and I think there's some new ones too, but those are the ones I spent the most time with. With Apache Chemistry, that lets you do basic CMIS functions. So who here has never heard of CMIS even after a day of DevCon? So everybody's heard of it at least. So what you need to understand is if you're working with CMIS and Alfresco, you probably want to get an extension to CMIS that lets you take advantage of Alfresco specific functionality. So for Python, there's an extension called, so the CMIS library for Python is CMIS-lib, and there's one called CMIS-lib Alfresco, which has the Alfresco extensions. And these are listed in the add-ons portal, in the add-ons directory, so that's where you can find them. I really wanted to spend some time discussing the Django extension that lets you get stuff from Alfresco into a Python Django site. But it's been discussed other places, especially in Jeff's and Florian's new book and Jay Brown's new book, Chemistry in Action. So I figured that's probably not the best thing to discuss here. But I think it's really valuable. So if you have an interest in those areas, that's the place to check. Oh, and Jeff told me I'm not supposed to be out here shilling his book. But if you want a discount code, I think they've got them at the registration desk. So the point is Apache Chemistry is the place to find out about CMIS stuff. So I stayed away from add-ons that are very CMIS focused. Other places to find out about add-ons. We do a Tech Talk Live the first Wednesday of every month, except for November because we're here. We also take off the 4th of July, I think, this year because we're Americans. But at least Jeff and I are. The Tech Talk Live is a very conversational approach to discussing some sort of developer topic. And we've had a number of them about add-ons. So two that really stand out is last February, we had one all about how to package your own add-ons. So if that's your interest, check out the Tech Talk Live. There's also a wiki page on packaging add-ons. It's worth checking out that wiki page. So, but episode 51 in Tech Talk Live, Peter and Jared discuss how to package your add-ons. Now, Mike Priest, one of our Canadian partners, he wrote a very nice add-on, which I think is the #1 rated add-on in the store right now, or in the directory right now, that's the Form and Model Designer. And it's a really slick add-on, and he goes into a lot of detail on it. He demos it in a 1-hour presentation. And I really thought about adding that to this presentation, but he did a much better job and spent a whole hour doing it. So I'm not going to repeat that here. But what I did notice as I was preparing this presentation is that it's even better than it was last March. So after you watch the Tech Talk Live, if you're interested, make sure you read the docs and get the latest version, because he's added a lot of new features and worked out a lot of bugs and things. It's a polished project at this point. And of course, the add-on site is a great place to find out about new add-ons. So again, we're looking at a broad view, not a deep view. So let's go to the add-on site. Well, I just duplicated him here. I'm not sure. I'm not confident in the network. But these are the highest rated add-ons in the site that are not on the list I just discussed. No, these are the highest rated add-ons as of yesterday off of the add-on site. And I want to give you a little bit of information about each one. So Alfresco Form-Model Management, that is Mike Priest's add-on. So that's the one that the Tech Talk Live is about. So if you're interested, check it out. The JavaScript console, I already mentioned, has its own DevCon session. It lets you do JavaScript coding straight in Alfresco Share. So it's a really nice place to test code within the environment that the repo is running. So if you're doing development, it's really a must-have, worth installing. Spend some time, play with it. The Gallery Plus Dashlet is the next highest add-on. That was the FME Dashlet submission that won the Dashlet Challenge. It's a very nice gallery view. You put media in, and it lays it out in a really visual way. It makes it easy to view lots of images and pick the image that's right for you and edit metadata and things. And it's a lot of inspiration for what we've done in our new gallery view in Alfresco 4, Alfresco 4.2, or whenever Ray got it done and it got released. So the latest Alfresco has a lot of those features. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing it here, but it's highly rated. If you're running earlier versions of Alfresco and you want some of those features, it's worth checking out that Dashlet. The recent comments Dashlet was also submitted as part of the Dashlet Challenge. It lets you put a Dashlet into Share that just displays the recent comments that you have permission to see in the repository. So it's really nice when you have, when you're collaborating around content. One of those things people request a lot is being able to have a feed into Alfresco to see, a notification framework. And we've deployed some of those resources, but having a Dashlet that lets you see recent comments meets a lot of that need for users. So, if you get that request, that's where you find it. There's a compress and download action, which is highly requested and is highly rated in the add-ons portal. It lets you select a bunch of content, you hit compress and download, and you get a zip file out. And that is now, we didn't take exactly that code, but we've implemented the same sort of functionality in 4.2. So if you check out the latest Alfresco Community Edition release and the next Enterprise release, it's no longer needed as an add-on. There's also an Alfresco encryption module, and it allows you to encrypt your content. We're doing a lot of similar things on the roadmap. It's going to come out in pieces, and I'll let one of the engineers discuss that in more detail. But the summary is, if you need it now, there's an add-on that gives you some of that functionality, but not in exactly the way we're going to implement it. There's a really nice add-on. Anybody who has multilingual content knows that the content that gets shown in Alfresco Share is determined by the locale of your browser. And it's really easy for you to go into, Firefox has a nice add-on that lets you change locales on the fly, and that's how a lot of us access multilingual content in Share. But not every user wants to install an Firefox add-on in order to do that, and they still need to access content in more than one language. So there's a change share locale add-on that lets you put a little button into Share that lets you do that. So this is on the roadmap. We actually implemented a good chunk of it at the hackathon during the training day. It lets you, so what we did during the hackathon was we added, Philippe actually did with some of his buddies. It's a button in the document library that says filter the document library for content in this language. So it's a little different approach, but it meets the same need. And so that's why we're not discussing change share locale in more detail today. But of course, what we did in the hackathon is not production ready. So if you need something now, it's worth checking out that add-on. The bulk file system import tool is the next highest rated add-on. It lets you import large amounts of content into Alfresco via the file system. It's the fastest way to get content into Alfresco. Peter Monks did it during his, I think he did it as a consulting project, and the customer allowed him to release it. And it has been added to Alfresco Core in 4.0. So there's a very detailed discussion on the bulk import file system tool, including use cases and profiling, and this sort of disk performed that much import versus these other disks that Peter did last year at DevCon. If you're interested, the slides are up as SlideShare, and it goes into a lot of that detail. The important thing to know about this project is that it's in Alfresco, but it's also Google code. And we're working on putting those back, but the community was adding improvements on a different, faster than engineering was ready to accept is pretty much how it ended up. And so they got a little out of sync. So we're working on getting those unforked and merged back together, or as the Atlassian folks say, spooned back together. And hopefully that'll all be resolved fairly soon. The next highest rated add-on is the Atlassian, Alfresco and Atlassian Confluence done by the AppLogic people, App Connection people. Anyway, it's a proprietary add-on, and it lets you see Alfresco within the Atlassian Confluence wiki. If you're interested in that sort of thing, it's worth checking out the plugin done by the Alfresco partner Rivet Logic. I haven't spent any time with the App Fusion's Confluence plugin, even though it is the one that's in the Atlassian store. But I have deployed the Rivet Logic plugin before. And Confluence is a nice wiki, and both of those plugins appear to work well. So there's two options for you. The Rivet Logic one is open source, but you can ask for support from Rivet Logic. I forgot to mention when I was discussing the add-on store, if you ever have any questions about the add-on store, under About in the add-ons directory, under About, there's an FAQ of frequently asked questions. So it's a way to get more information. Sorry for the tangent. Okay, and then the next highest is Audit Surf. Audit Surf lets you view audit details through an Alfresco Surf interface, or through a Spring Surf interface. I tried to play with it, but it doesn't support 4.0 yet. So, but it's fairly slick that way. I don't read French, so I had a hard time catching up on it. So that is the add-ons, the highest rated add-ons. So let's do a bit of a deep dive now. Oh yeah, some add-ons that aren't on that list because I really wanted to spend time on them today, but just couldn't get to it. There's this really slick concept that Venzia IT contributed to the store called MetaDB Connector. And what it does is it lets you tie Alfresco to an external database to pull in metadata for documents. I get that request fairly regularly. It's a very highly rated add-on. The challenge is it's kind of a complex use case. You have to have your separate database, and to demo it, you have to have some metadata and put the connections in. It looks like a mature project. It looks well documented. I just ran out of time. So if I had more time, that would be in this presentation. If you have that sort of need, it's probably worth checking out. TriBloom, one of our US partners, has a dashlet called repository size. For a technical person, for one of the admins, it's really nice to be able to put that dashlet in, and every time you log in Alfresco, see here's how much space Alfresco is using for indexes, for the content store, and for the caches. And that's what it says. It's a pretty simple dashlet, but it's highly rated. And the only challenge is you have to compile it before you install it. And I had some build dependency issue and moved on to other ones I thought we should discuss more today, because that one, it's pretty self-explanatory. Shows you the repository size. The unzip action. This is an add-on that lets you add a zip file to the repo, and then you click on it, and you just have a little action that says unzip. And it has three options. You can unzip here, you can unzip to a subdirectory, or you can unzip to a directory of your choosing. And the subdirectory names the directory after the zip file. It's really user-friendly. It's got big buttons. It's really easy to find through. It installed super easy, except it didn't work. So it might have been my fault. I don't know. But I had lots of add-ons that I wanted to share with you, so I didn't spend much more time on that one. If you have a need, they look like a good group of developers. Unfortunately, I don't speak French, and that's what their webpage was in. But they had good English documentation. The issue queue I couldn't browse through because it was all in French. So if you have that need, I highly recommend, instead of you implementing your own, try this one and help them get it solved. It looked really impressive. They also did one called the multiple RSS feed. Again, super easy to install. Looked like a active team of developers and an interesting project. Lots of French, unfortunately for me, but good for everybody else. But there was a bug in the configuration, so I couldn't quite get it to. Anyway, summary is instead of building your own, start with their source. It looked like it'd be worth pursuing. So if I had more time. Okay, let's look in more detail. So I forgot to remove the ones that I had challenges with, but we're going to talk about 3 in more detail. The model designer, the shell tools, and the share, import, export scripts. But before I did that, I should just say, builder beware. There's some caveats around this presentation. I'm not the author, so I only know what I read on the web page and figured out as I played with each one of these for a couple hours, half day each. I generally haven't reviewed the code. This is not an endorsement that it's the best way to go about solving these problems, all those common things. But they look good, so I thought I'd let you know. So I'm telling you everything I know about these, and it's not much. My environment, in case you're interested, I'm running Linux Mint Debian Edition. I'm running OpenJDK 1.7. I tried a couple of these in 4.2, but not all of them support 4.2 yet, so I moved down to 4.0, yada yada. If you're curious, if you try to duplicate what I did and you have problems, you can look at that slide later. Okay, let's look at the model designer. So I stole this screenshot out of their video. So the model designer is pretty slick. It meets a very similar use case to Mike Priest's one that I mentioned earlier. So I think the #1 add-on in the store is Mike Priest's form and model designer for Alfresco. And the #3 rated add-on in the store is Alfresco Model Designer by by this group, the BCE people. They meet the same use case. They provide a GUI for producing a model definition and for producing share forms. They do them in slightly different ways, though they interact with Alfresco through the same touch points. Mike's appeared to have more features from what I saw in his demos and played with a little bit, but it was a little bit more fiddly. This one appears to be a bit simpler to use and to get set up, but it might not have all the bells and whistles. So 2 different approaches to meet this need. Both look plenty nice, so if you have this need, it's probably worth looking at both of them. This one does not yet support 4.2. What it does is it gives you the GUI and you go through and you say here, and I'll show you in a minute, but here's the model definition and here's how we can tie it into forms. And when you hit publish, it writes it out as XML into the data dictionary, where models go into the hot deploy models folder, and the forms go into the hot deploy config folder. So that's kind of what's going on. What I found with both of these tools, these are not tools for you to sit down and learn how Alfresco models work. You don't get that much hand-holding. So I actually found that even though I've attended training and read quite a bit, I still had to go look up some additional stuff and ask Jeff a question or two as I was playing with the model designer. So I can show you a little bit related to this. I'm not going to show you much. Part of it's because, well, I'm not as behind schedule as I thought I would be. But they have a really nice YouTube video. It's about 10 minutes long, and it demos this really well. And so I'm not going to replace their demo. I'm not going to go into as much detail as they did. But just to give you a really quick overview. So when you log in as admin, I'll talk about installation in a minute. So you log in as admin, and under more, you get a really nice model designer button. And when you come in, you get your model designer. And on your left, imagine that, you've got your configuration. So this just loads anything that's in data dictionary models. So it picks up anything you already have on the system. By the way, this is totally out of the box. So one of the things that's really nice about this project is they provide some of this out-of-the-box samples that helps you figure out what's going on. Anyway, so it pulls the configurations in, it pulls the models in. So the configuration is the configuration folder in data dictionaries, which is where forms are stored. And model is the model folder in data dictionary where the models are stored. So you've got your namespaces, you've got your imports, you've got your types, you've got your aspects. You can come in, defines the type a bit. You can define mandatory aspects. It's got all the ones in the system. As we scroll down, you can scroll through all the aspects. It'll reload fairly quickly if you define a new aspect and then come in and add it as a mandatory aspect. That all works okay. It supports linking, constraints, list values, property lists, all that sort of thing. Then you can come in and say, let's do a new item. And item 1. And you can go in and select the type of association that's important for you. What kind of element you're going to associate with, another property. So here we have our new type. And then, how you want to index it. It's everything you put in XML. That's pretty much how it's summarized. And then when everything's done, you hit the publish button and it'll kick the XML out. Now the other thing I want to show you is we select the form we want to edit, and then we can drag. This took me a little bit to figure out, and it's not highlighting like it's supposed to. Okay, I'm doing something wrong. I might have to go watch the YouTube video again. But before you can edit a form, you have to you pick the elements you're going to put onto it. And then you can put the controls on, and then you put the custom type. And that's obviously not going as well as I'd hoped, so I'm going to move on gracefully. So anyway, that's the model designer. Besides, I'm out of time on that anyway. Okay, so a couple important items about the model designer. How installation works. It's just a tarball. It contains the amps. It was really easy to install. The key is that there's some instructions in the tar, but it didn't have as much information as the wiki. I had to go to the wiki page to, not the Alfresco wiki, but the wiki for the model designer. The installer tells you that when you install the amp, you have to have the -- force flag. So anybody who installs amps, in case you're curious, the amp is copying the contents, it's just a zip file, into the Alfresco war or the share war, depending on where you apply the amp. And it warns you, it does not want to overwrite Alfresco core files. And if you do -- force, then you're overwriting Alfresco core files, which means when you upgrade Alfresco, badness can happen. So you don't want to do that unless you're really certain that you want to do that. So they say, for a previous version, it was required for you to do the force flag. It's not currently required. I left the flag off. Everything worked. So the documentation is a little bit out of date there. Once you start Alfresco, if you're using earlier versions of Alfresco 4.0, you have to manually deploy that shared component. So you go to the services modules deploy, and you get two little boxes, and you say, to publish this component, deploy this component, and then it works. If you're in newer versions of Alfresco, then it just happens, and you find it through the admin tools. I thought I had one more slide on it. Nope, I don't. Okay, so that's the model designer. So shell tools. Shell tools is a really slick project. I'm a Linux sysadmin sort of DevOps person by background, and shell tools is very nice because it lets you access Alfresco from Bash, from the command line in Unix. And one of the engineers was showing me this, and I thought it was so cool that I said, hey, I contacted Lothar, who might be here. Hey, Lothar, so if there's any questions, we do have the expert. And I said, hey, can we list this on add-ons and I can demo it to everybody at DevCon? And he said, I guess. He didn't think it was quite that ready yet, but I think it's great. Just understand it is a fairly new project. So It's just shell scripts written in Bash, and it really, for me, it shows off the flexibility of Alfresco, because it's hitting Alfresco through curl. And so it's just hitting Alfresco REST APIs, but it works really well. The trick is it's all through JSON, and so you have to do some work on to get JSON stuff working in Bash okay. When you install it, there's a library that contains the magic that's used by all the other shell tools. So just understand that's what that's doing. Some examples: you can create a site from the command line. You can delete from the command line content or sites. You can upload from the command line. Ways that I see this being really useful: when I need to set up a demo environment, currently I wrote a bunch of shell scripts to set up a demo environment, but it's all unzipping. Currently my scripts, I have to back up Alfresco to a content store backup and a database backup, and then I unzip it all and do a restore. Whereas with shell tools, I could say, create a site named this, and add these users, and set up this case, and set up that case. So setting up that sort of development environment or a test site, there's a lot of manual involved in that. And these tools can make it really easy to automate it in a way that's easy to pick up by whatever unit test infrastructure, really integration test infrastructure you currently have. So it's a good development tool, but it is a development tool. So just in case anybody gets the wrong idea, I wouldn't suggest hitting your production site with these scripts. They're not tailored for performance. They're kind of quick and dirty. They work. I think they're pretty slick, but I wouldn't hit your production site with them. So let's go into some details on how it works. So okay, so here's the list of tools. Add authority to a group, create a group, all the way down, delete user, set avatar, do a search, update user, upload. It's quite a list. So I need to face this way a bit. So I have my notes. So give you an example. We want to list the groups. There's our list of groups. So you want to know how many groups you have in your system. Then you just list your groups and you pipe it into wc-l. It's just standard Unix stuff, and it works with Alfresco. It makes me all warm and happy. So he's done a pretty good job for a guy who tells me these are all really quick and dirty. They've all got a -help, and so you can go through and say, here's the global options, here's the command-specific options, here's the arguments. So if you're ever not exactly sure, you don't have to read the script. But the scripts are pretty clean. It wasn't too hard to figure out what's going on. But there's your global options for this one. So that was for listing groups. So let's create a group, and let's call it staff. So you can turn off the debug, but that's the JSON that got sent over curl. And let's create another group, and let's say its parent group is going to be staff. Oh, and I listed groups, I forgot to point out, but staff was not in that list, so there's no magic here, right? Well, I guess the magic's in the scripts. No sleight of hand. So we're going to have a new group. It's going to be a child group of staff. It's going to have the description alfresco space employees, and the group name is going to be employees. So that doesn't happen this morning. Employee requested URL return. That's just the way things go. Did I do something silly? alfCreate group, staff. Oh, yes, that's my problem. Thank you, sir, for telling me that I should have cut and pasted instead of trying to type in front of people. Excellent. So we created that group. And let's create a second one. I think I've decided that IQ is a function of how many eyeballs are staring at you. That more eyeballs, lower IQ. So we created our contractors. And now when we list our groups, we see we've got staff, we've got contractors. And if we go back into Alfresco, and we come, view our groups. We've got our staff group, and if we can look at our user list, our group list, where we add groups here. I'm an admin, right? Browse, thank you. And here's our staff. And when we look at our staff, we've got our child groups. Currently, nobody's in them. But yes, I think it's really cool. So I'm glad for the enthusiasm. Thanks, Boris. So, okay, I'm going to cut and paste this one because it's a little bit longer. So here, I'm going to create a new user. And user Richard Esplin, and put him in the employees group. And there it goes. And you can see it's pre-populated everything. And you can fill out those if you want to. There's a way to add properties to the JSON. And now we can list our users. And there's our Esplin. So nothing too special here. But the slick thing is, it's just so highly automatable. I'll need that if I get network. Okay, so it'll also do, I showed you the list. It'll do a lot of cool stuff. I think search is pretty cool. So we can search for anything with the term plugs in it, and it'll give us the workspace ID. We can then take that workspace ID, and we can call all sorts of things on it. For instance, instead of cut and pasting that workspace ID, let's just take that workspace ID and use it as pipe it into metadata. So now the dash says, take it from standard in. And so there's the metadata printed out for the image we got that is an image of plugs. But hey, that's kind of ugly. So we can pass that back on to a shell tool called JSON and select what we're interested in seeing. And where did I cut and paste wrong? Oh, there it is. And say we're looking for the property MIME type. And it's an image. So, you can select the name, you can select whatever you want, but it makes it really slick to find out specifics about what you're doing. Okay, so back to discussion. Holy cow, 5 minutes. Okay, so installation, it's normal Unix stuff, bash, grep, perl, curl. The trick is that JSON stuff. So it uses JSON. JSON's a nice command line for interacting with JSON. You have to get it out of Git. You have to build it yourself. It actually wasn't that bad once if you cut and paste those three things, it works in Debian, or most Unixes. The big trick with shell tools is giving it the configuration. So there's two ways to give it the configuration for where Alfresco is. Every command you can say -h for host and give it the host name and the admin name and the admin password. Or you can set environment variables. I chose to put environment variables in my ZHRC, ZSHenv, or bashrc. But you just gotta add them to your path. Or you gotta add the paths to JSON and the shell tools to your path, and then add the variables. Or you have to put it in each command line that you're running. So I think the good points are pretty obvious. It's just slick. Unix pipes. Everybody loves Unix pipes. Just so you're aware again, this is a new project. It needs some help. I'm sure Lothar would appreciate lots of help. You get the debug output. Passwords get echoed to the user. This isn't written for security. This is not written for performance. It gets the job done and it does it well. So it's not for production. Okay, last one today is share import export scripts. So this one's been around a while. It was written by Will Abson, who did the share extras add-ons, set of add-ons hosted at Google Code. And share import export scripts is pretty slick. It lets you do, it's like shell tools for sites in share. They're written in Python. They're under the Apache license. So what it does is it does an HTTP auth through Python URL lib, and then it hits the JSON web scripts, and it pulls down everything related to a site and packages it up as an ACP and spits it out onto the disk. it's pretty slick. It lets you manage the sites, it lets you manage the users, it lets you do backups and restores of individual sites instead of an entire Alfresco. It supports records management, it supports WebQuickStart. It's really slick. So use cases, when I was working with the sales team, and I can see a lot of consultants for system integrators using this sort of thing to build a library of sites that meets of demo sites. So you don't have to have your whole Alfresco installed for financial services people. You can have your site for financial services people and import it into the Alfresco install. And you can pick. It'd be really nice one day if we had a public library of demo sites like that. We've kicked that around. It's just a question of time. It's it automated tests, of course, setting up a test environment, default site configurations before you do deployments, all that sort of thing. It's really good at. It's a good development tool. It's pretty mature at this point. It's been around 2 years. Will's always fixing bugs. He's been very responsive when I've had concerns. But again, I'd be very cautious about any of these scripts against the production system. I'd make sure to test it thoroughly. Though I can see use cases for hitting production with this. I wouldn't definitely say it's a bad idea, but be cautious. So this demo is pretty quick. Okay, let's share, import, export. So let us, again, it's got a very nice --help. You can go through and figure out all the details. So if you have any questions, check that out. And I'm going to cut and paste this. So share import export is a collection of Python scripts, and each one does its own little thing. Alfresco.py is kind of a library. You're not going to interact with it directly. Ping.py is pretty quick, pretty slick. It'll pause, it'll block until share's up. So if you have this in an automated deployment sort of scenario, maybe as part of an integration test, you run ping.py and then it'll wait until Alfresco's up and then everything else can execute. But the main way that I interact with this is through export site and import site because it calls all the others. So we run it. We've said we're going to do the sample website. We're going to export as JSON. We're going to log in as admin. It's exported the content, the data list, the document library, the links, the wiki. It saves it all as ACPs, exports site information, and logs itself out. Oh, I should have given a subdirectory. But so everything on the right there is what came out of that. So I was going to show you the I was going to show you the text of the JSON, but we're going to skip that because we're out of time. But we can now go ahead and delete that site. Let's purge it from Alfresco. So it kicks the whole site out. If any of you haven't seen, when you log in as Alfresco as an admin the first time, it's just a blank Alfresco, there's a sample website that Paul Hampton put in there. So it gives you an idea of what Alfresco can do and you can play around. So we just deleted that sample site out from the command line. And then, but no fear, we can bring it back. So it reads the JSON file. The JSON file tells it where all the ACPs are, and it loads everything back in. And if we went back into Alfresco Share and browsed it, we would see the site's back. So it's pretty slick. So, and one of the really nice things about Share Import Export is it comes with 4 sample sites. So here's one that's full of images, and something. Man, it's just that kind of day. Cloud user. Anyway. But we've created the site. It was during the adding of the site members that it had a problem, but it loaded a bunch of stuff related to the site. So now, if we go into Alfresco Share, and we come up and say sites, search for sites. Let's just get the full list. We just created an image gallery, and the image gallery has everything it had before it had an error. But that's oh, and the sample website is back. Search for sites. So this is the one we purged and we brought back, and it's got all the same data and all the same users and all the same everything. So to wrap up, yeah, it takes Python 2.6, 2.7. It really is download, extract, and run. It's very easy to set up. You probably want to, you can call every script with Python at the front, or you can make it executable. I of course prefer to make it executable. Most of the interactions to that main site, I explained all that. Help flag, yeah, create all that. Oh, you can create a package that'll export a site as a jar file, so it's easy to move it from one Alfresco to another. Very slick. Now, be cautious. I already mentioned a lot of stuff that you probably want to do is to test data because it exposes a lot of information you might not want exposed. Also, it's not necessarily portable across versions. I wouldn't export a 3.4 and import it into 4.0. Though I heard that sometimes it works, but I wouldn't do that. Between Alfresco Community and Alfresco Enterprise, there's a lot of scenarios, a lot of things could go wrong. So just that's the biggest caution there. So I hope that it was helpful. I know we covered a lot of things at a very high level. I'm sure you have more questions. I might be able to answer some of them, though I doubt it. But feel free to ask. There's always new add-ons. If you are aware of an add-on that's not in the add-ons directory, feel free to submit it. We can always assign it to the actual maintainer later if they're interested in maintaining that entry. And if you're interested in contributing, please let me know. These add-ons are all done by wonderful people who have volunteered, contributed, shared with the community, and that's why we all benefit. And I hope you can all make a contribution as well. So thank you very much.